Our last topic for today will be modules and imports. You saw this a bit in the lab last week, but I want to take some time during this lecture to go over it more in depth. So these modules and imports. Modules, very similar to how we used functions to organize our code. These modules let us organize larger code bases and importantly, reuse code that other people have written. And so I'll use YouTube as an example since that's where I work. Certainly all of YouTube isn't written just in one big file called youtube.py. That'd be massive. Instead, we have all sorts of different files that have implement different functionality. So maybe they have a file that implements processing comments or filtering spam from comments. Or there's a different file that is responsible for maybe building the page that streams your actual YouTube video, the actual player page. So each of these kind of core pieces of functionality are split across these different modules that different people own or different teams own. And then somewhere in a central place, these modules are used. Some modules are only used kind of in one place, and they're split off into pieces just to make ownership more clear. But other modules are reused all over YouTube, like maybe something for formatting the view count, right? You might have noticed how on YouTube, the view count, if it's under 1,000, it'll say 475 views. But once you get into thousands, it'll say 1.4K or 2.3K. Or maybe as some of these counts get bigger, at some point you're going to do 1 mil or 1.2 mil or 9.9 mil. So that kind of logic would go very well in a module that could then be imported and used by people in all sorts of places across YouTube. So what is a module? Actually, it's very simple. You've been writing modules all along. A module is just any Python file that contains definitions and statements. You can and you have been making your own. And the way you do this is you have your file that has some name. Let's say I created a file named helper.py, and it has this great pretty print and maxval function. All you have to do is in any other Python file, you put this import helper statement at the top. And why helper? Because the file name that we have here is helper.py, and this file, let's assume, is in the same directory, in the same folder as main.py. So we do import helper. And then inside of your function here, where you imported, inside of your file where you imported this helper file here, this helper module, you can now use any functions or read any values from or variables from this other file by doing helper dot and then the thing that you want to read from its kind of frame. So we have helper.maxval. So this will refer to the maxval function inside of the helper.py file, which is the helper module. So why don't we just take a look at how we would do this in Replit. So we'll go over here. Why don't we create a helper.py file? And inside of here, we'll print some handy function. Def, I like this idea of pretty print. So just something that prints out a little more nicely, a given string. Instead of just printing it like regular, I want to have a bunch of stars before and after. And in between, I'll print whatever the given string is. Actually, let's just run this and see what it does. We'll do pretty print Howard helper.py. So you can see it prints Howard inside of these stars. Now that we have this helper.py, we can go back to our main.py, and at the very top, because these are in the same directory, we can type import helper. And whoops, choose my changes here. Yes, so we can do import helper. And now, if we want, we can do helper dot pretty print any string that we want. Maybe like Go Bears. So if we write this code, now we can run this main.py file and call this function that's defined in this helper module that we just created. Won't be super common that for this class you'll have to create a module for your own work, like if you're just writing on something from scratch, but you may need to create modules as part of a project, or fill in implementations of functions in a module that are then called from somewhere else as part of a bigger thing that's being built. Now, I showed you how to make your own module. Actually, what's most common is using pre-made modules, some of which are provided by Python. They're just not always loaded. So you have to, explicitly import them. And others are provided by not the Python organization, all sorts of other organizations. Google, for example, provides, I'm sure, a TensorFlow module that you can use to do machine learning in Python. Or there's something called SciPy, which lets you do all sorts of statistics and all these different kind of handy subroutines that you wouldn't want to have to implement yourself from scratch. So we're going to learn our first one today, and this is called random. So at the top of your code, you can do import random. And then random has this rand range function provided in the module that gives you a random number in this range. And same as the ranges that we're used to, this is starting from 0 inclusive, going up to 10 exclusive, taking steps of size 1. And when you run this code, it'll print out random integers. And yeah, as I say here, end is just exclusive. So why don't we run this and just see what it does. So import random, rand int, random.rand range. So run this. Oops, I'll go over here and run it. Python 3. Okay, so we ran it once, it printed 1. Run it again, it prints 8. This time prints 8 again, then 5, then 3. In fact, why don't I just do this for I in range 10? I'll do this 10 times. And you can see what it prints each time. So, looks kind of random, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It printed 7 twice. There's no 8 because it printed 1 twice. And no 9 because I guess 3 was twice. But yeah, pretty random. So this is nice if you're trying to do something like, maybe some percentage, right? If you want to do something 15% of the time at random, you can get a random number between 0 and 100. And you'll do this thing if the number is less than 15. Because, out of the possible 100 numbers, 15 of them are less than 15. And so the odds of you getting a number that's below 15 is 15%. But you might be wondering, hey, how did I know this behavior of this rand range function? I didn't write the module, so how am I supposed to know that this function exists or how to use it? This is documentation. And documentation, common term, it's the description of the functions that a programmer writes. And if you work at a company, actually wherever you work, documentation will be super important. You'll need to document how your code works so that other people can use it and understand it and work on it. And so all I did was I Googled Python random module. In fact, I'll do that right now. Random module. And the very top result here is docs.python.org, the official documentation for the random module. And if I scroll down here, it says functions for integers, and I can see this random.rand range. And it describes exactly how it works here. This is a super valuable skill that I want you to learn, is how do you find and read documentation online? So how do you answer your own questions? Another great example is, what about the round function? Yeah, go ahead and Google Python round function and find the documentation and read about how to use that function. Okay, that'll be it for today. that's it with functions, and you'll get to practice them this week in class and in the lab this week. And next class, we'll start talking about our first data structure, the list. I'll see you all then. Bye.